Yo, I'm not late. I thought I fixed the Stream Deck tweeting for me, but apparently I did not. So then I had to sit there and type out a tweet because I was not prepared for it to not work because I thought it was going to work this time. Okay, I don't know if we're going to finish this book before the end of the month because there's still quite a bit left to read in 3 days. Yeah, we still have 150 pages to read. That's so many. Alright, we're on chapter 23, which is in Arlo's perspective. She'd been hoping to catch her breath in the forest. The high wraith had been soothing, but when Arlo fled past Nikos and the others in the assistants' lobby and wrenched the door back open, it was directly back in Toronto she'd stepped. This was fine. There was air out here too. Dropping her tote, Arlo crouched and stuck her head between her knees. How long she stayed like this she couldn't say, but she gulped the air as though she'd been drowning and tried to reorganize her whirlwind thoughts. Vahan was right. She should lend her help, even if all she could do was somehow get them through that sealed door. Surely the High King would forgive her use of alchemy if it meant the end of all these murders. If it meant keeping the Prince of Seelie Summer from winding up in the news as well. And really, would it draw any more unwanted attention to herself than she'd already done so far, to follow Vahan to this mysterious facility? But she was scared. Cassandra's death was still fresh in her mind, and she didn't want to end up the same. Another body on the news, reduced to a number, dismissed by the courts in death just as she'd been in life. A human problem. So yes, she was scared, and she was tired. Most of her family regarded her as a nuisance. The ones who didn't treated her like she was delicate glass, fragile, and capable of doing anything for herself. Even Celadon, whom she loved so much, and who loved her so much in return, kept her too close sometimes. There were times she felt like some storybook princess held away from the world in a tower, forever only watching and never truly a part of anything. Nausicaa, Vahan, even Aurelian, they didn't know not to count on her. They didn't know that asking her to be a part of this team was actually condemning it to failure, that any time she tried to leave that tower, disaster followed. She should tell them no, save both of them and herself from another disappointment. She should, but a not insignificant part of Arlo didn't want to. A part of her whispered what if, the same as it had done in her weighing. The same as it had done to chase her into the fairy ring, and this entire plot to begin with. What if this time was different? The minutes creeped by. Arlo lifted her head from between her knees and scrubbed at her face, wiping away the tears she'd finally allowed herself to shed. She had to head home. It had grown late. She was cutting it close to her curfew. Her hour was almost up, but this hadn't been nearly enough time to make such an important decision. She couldn't just leave. She'd have to go back in and tell the prince something, but what could she say? What am I supposed to do here? She wondered aloud. Maybe they'd give her the night to think this over. That was reasonable, wasn't it? They couldn't expect her to sign on to this ridiculous high-risk scheme of theirs without a little time for consideration. The least they could do was give her a few more hours. There was no harm in asking. If not, she'd simply have to tell them no and be done with it. Turning back to the curiosity shop, she pulled the door open but found it wasn't at all the lobby she'd left. It was for all intents and purposes an exact replica, but gone were the fairy and fae adults. A human boy stood just as frozen as Arlo, caught by her sudden appearance, holding a broom in his hands. Scrawny, boar-black hair, a wild mess of loose curls around his head, brown eyes wide in shock. He looked no older than Elias. Hello? Came his tentative greeting. I'm sorry, we're actually closed. Yeah, is Nausicaa still upstairs? Arlo spluttered. Who? Nausicaa. The boy shook his head, confused. What about Nikos? Where did he go? The boy's heavy brow was knitted together in deeper concern. My father isn't here today. Hey, are you okay? Do you need help or something? She'd entered the wrong shop. This wasn't the assistant's. This was the human front of Chorley's Curiosities. Crap. She moaned and backed out of the shop. Slamming the door closed, she tried again. But when it opened a second time, it was still the boy with his broom staring back at her, possibly contemplating calling the police. She slammed the door again. No matter how she clawed at the hinges where it had previously opened and knocked on that side of the wood, she couldn't get back to her friends. Alright, well, I guess I'll just wait. There wasn't anything else she could do. She had her phone, but she didn't have anyone's number to make that useful. If she waited out here long enough, someone would come looking for her, wouldn't they? She'd give them the rest of the hours she could spare before they really had to leave. Brushing her hair away from her face, she turned back to stare unseeingly off down the street at the flood of vehicles and all the people with somewhere else to be, and leaned against the shop front's window. Minutes ticked by. No one came for her. Time had run out, according to the clock on her phone, and the street started to grow congested with people venturing out for dinner. She should just go. If Vahan wanted her to change her mind, Nausicaa was apparently all too capable of finding her in the city. With a sigh, she reached for her phone, intending to do what Nausicaa had suggested earlier, and fire off a text to her mother. She'd tell her that work had run a little long and she was heading home now. Maybe her mother would buy it, maybe she wouldn't. She had to try, though, but just as she unlocked her phone, "Help!" Arlo paused. She could have sworn she'd heard something, a child's voice calling out. It had been too faint, and Arlo had been too distracted to really tell. She waited and listened, looking around, but nothing seemed out of place. Nothing, she determined. Her mind had been playing tricks on her. She carried on. "Help me, somebody, please." That was no trick. There was someone in genuine trouble nearby. She whirled around, replacing her phone in her pocket. That cry had come from the alley between the Slovaki shop and a realtor's office. She was sure of it, but no one else seemed to notice. No one else on the sidewalk had stopped or turned their head toward the sound. They certainly noticed her, pale and wide-eyed in shock, staring off after something they couldn't hear, but continued by, giving her as wide a berth as they could manage. Crap. It would have to be her. She couldn't ignore this, couldn't just leave, and she couldn't get back to the others. Crap, okay. One foot stepped in front of the other, bringing her in something of a daze to the alley. But it was just that, an alley, a narrow stretch of brick and a couple massive bins for trash. Overstuffed black bags piled all around. Grime streaked the pavement and brick of the surrounding buildings, but between them nothing. There was no child here in danger. There was no one calling for help. In fact, there was hardly any life at all. Hardly any sound, as though the alley wasn't just an alley in the least, but a crevice carved from magic. Arlo stared. She could feel her heart pounding against her ribs, and so much adrenaline pumped through her that she felt lightheaded and numb. This, she determined, was the reason why she stepped off the sidewalk and into an alley steeped in so much wrongness. 1 step, 2. Arlo shivered and stopped in her tracks. This quiet isn't natural, her brain warned. It could be magic, enforcing the silence. It could just be the press of the brick around her, the porous stone swallowing up the sounds of city life. She had to keep calm. Drawing a breath to fortify her nerves, Arlo peered deeper into the alley's depths. "Hello?" she called. "Is anyone there?" No response. She sighed and turned around, relieved that it had been nothing. The sound had been the result of the considerable stress she'd been under these past few weeks. When she got home tonight, she was going to take a bubble bath and binge-watch She-Ra and the Princess of Power on Netflix until she fell asleep. But then, Pretty Petal. Arlo felt her heart freeze. She knew that voice, recognized it instantly, along with the barely there scent of brine and rot, and she didn't want to turn around. At the same time, she couldn't prevent herself from doing so. The Reaper. Magic it was then, a glamour, and a powerful one at that, to be thrown over something outside oneself, more powerful than something this creature could manage, so it couldn't be working alone. Someone had to be helping it, but who? She didn't have time to ponder the question. Skeletal tall and looming over Arlo, no longer distorted, as it had been at the fairy ring, the Reaper stood well over 8 feet, and was sliver slim. Half its skull was missing, a hollow shell without any evidence of eyes or a brain, but it didn't need eyes to get around. It could scent the air just fine through the holes that were all that was left of its nose, and taste the fear it inspired with its gaping mouth crammed full of jagged teeth. It was nothing but knobbly bone and decayed flesh, little better than grain tarp stretched taut across its emaciated frame. Every child in the magical community had grown up on the whispers of what this sort of fairy could do with its ancient, festering magic and elongated fingers, used to pry and break apart bone, so it could suck the very marrow from its innards. Reapers consumed. It was all they did. Like vultures, they were drawn to dark magic, to death and decay, and were legendarily difficult to kill. Fallow Viridian Verdell had won the position she now commanded by walking into the High King's throne room and dropping a Reaper's head at his feet. No one, not even the misogynistic members of the courts who hated having a woman and mother as the leader of their army, had been able to deny after that she was the one for the job. Yo, her mom's killed a Reaper? Damn. Fallow Viridian Verdell would stand a chance against the creature behind Arlo. Her daughter could hardly stand at all. Pretty little spring flower, the Reaper continued, its rasping voice like bitter wind scraping through a broken window. At last. It leaned in to scent the air around her, and Arlo gasped, stumbling backward, covering her nose with her hands to try to block out the Reaper's putrid stench. Leaving so soon? I've been looking everywhere for you. For her? Arlo's mind reeled. Half of her was still keyed up with the adrenaline that had brought her here, while the other half was petrified by this surety of her impending death. This was it. She'd played the hero, and just as she'd predicted, she'd drawn too much attention. The Reaper was here for her. She was going to die, horribly, painfully. Reapers enjoyed their meals best when they were alive to scream and struggle, and dismemberment wasn't exactly gentle. Matching each of Arlo's trembling steps toward the street with a long and easy stride, the Reaper prowled after her. How many times you've slipped through my grasp. How many times I got the wrong mark. You mortals, you're all the same to me, but my master was most displeased. He'll be happy tonight. Come here, little flower, let me taste you. The Reaper moaned in anticipation of doing so, but just as the tips of its fingers brushed Arlo's hair, she unfroze and bolted. Back out into the street she plunged, beating away as fast as her legs could carry her. The Reaper followed. Crap, she hadn't thought this through. Heedless of the very human world around it, it plowed out into the street as well, knocking pedestrians aside, crashing into bikes and telephone poles, and cars that were lined against the curb. The humans couldn't see it. It had kept some of its glamour then, but they could certainly hear when it snarled, and the folk that were scattered among them screamed. Arlo pushed herself harder. She'd never be able to outrun a Reaper. How she'd even managed to keep ahead of it this long meant she most likely had the city itself to thank. Reapers were fast, but the city was full of obstacles, and these creatures weren't used to navigating such spaces. The sound of something blowing through brick, of windows shattering, and even more screaming, and something heavy enough to send a ripple through the earth, made Arlo's head whip around. Sure enough, the Reaper had misjudged a hurdle and crashed into a building beside it. It fell to the ground and bellowed its fury. Sirens flared in the distance. The Reaper swiped at the people who unwittingly got in its way as it clawed itself back to its feet. Arlo pushed harder. The Reaper was after her. She had to lead it away from the Danforth to someplace not so packed with potential casualties. something large sailed overhead. Arlo could hear it groan through the motion, watched as its shadow enveloped her. Overwhelmed by its size, she skidded to a halt just in time to narrowly miss being crushed by what dropped directly in front of her from the sky. The Reaper had thrown a car. There was no time to let herself panic over such a close shave or pat herself down like she wanted to make sure she'd actually survived. She bolted across the street, weaving deftly through the traffic that had screeched to a halt, and all over what must have looked like a Mazda picking itself off the ground. Wind snapped quick, she slipped among the mob of people, running for safety, and made for another alley, hoping it would lead to something slightly less congested. But just on the cusp, her shoe caught her opposite heel. She tripped. Pitching forward, she drove for the cracked and crumbling pavement, her palms outstretched to catch her fall. Are you kidding me? There, barely inches from her splayed hands, was the Not Troll's goddamn die. It sat there, innocuous, face up on 4, all polished jade and gleaming gold numbers, and 100% useless. She'd already discovered that in her last encounter with the monster closing in behind her. You can't outrun me, petal child. The Reaper had finally untangled itself from its fall. It made its approach, picking its way across the street, batting aside the vehicles it passed. Fear rose like bile in Arlo's throat, and she gagged, but there was no time for this. I hate you. She seethed at the die she snatched up, and with strength that was purely adrenaline, she heaved herself to her feet. People had gathered at the opposite end of the alley, drawn by their curiosity. With all the roaring and the shaking and the many other sounds of chaos, Arlo didn't blame them. But how long did she have until the Reaper turned its frustration on innocent people? Go back inside, Arlo shouted as she tore through the gawking crowd. She tried to push them aside, and some of them scattered. But more only gravitated back to their places as though magnetized to the spot. Damn it, she cursed. She'd have to try a different tactic. Hey, she wheeled around, just as the Reaper knocked through the crowd too. Hey you stupid. Oh wow, she was going to have to get better at taunting in her next life. But the Reaper's attention swiveled from the humans it had started to consider, the humans that would be a much easier target than she'd proven to be. You want me, you ugly piece of crap. Come get me. She ran. The Reaper shrieked and pitched its toy aside. All too happy to engage in a bit of sport before it ate like any proper predator, it tore after Arlo. Down another alley, out into another street, this one running through a residential neighborhood, where people were at least inside their homes and not in immediate danger. She pushed herself with everything she had, but behind her the Reaper only gained momentum. It was toying with her too, perhaps too curious to see how long she could keep this up, to end it just yet. But there would be an end. Link! You had food. What food did you have? And yes, I am reading. When she came to yet another alley tucked between 2 apartment buildings, her immediate reaction was to turn down it, to just keep this up until the Faucian arrived, or maybe the Wild Hunt, and only then did she realize her unfortunate mistake. Mariquetta? What is that? Am I pronouncing it horribly? Mariquetta? I don't know. Does that mean I pronounced it horribly? Mariquetta? I know you're supposed to roll the R. I can't roll R's though. I can't do that. So that's as close as I'm gonna get to pronouncing it correctly. Because I can't roll R's. But what is that? What is Mariquetta? No more room, pretty flower. Widely out of breath, she squeezed her eyes closed. It took a moment to gather herself. This was it. This was her death. The fence was built too high to scale. Oh, a type of bread? I do like bread. Nowhere to run. I didn't think I'd have so much fun when they brought me here to collect their little would-be alchemist. When my master instructed me to hunt you down as well. Are you ready to meet Death, Child of Spring? Arlo whirled around. Why me? The words flew out of her mouth before she could stop them, but they weren't a plea for life, as perhaps they should be. They were hot. They were angry. They were confused by what she could have possibly done to earn such a desperate desire to take her out. Why are you out here specifically for me? What have I done that's so threatening to your master? The Reaper laughed, a hollow sound rattling in its chest, and drew a few steps closer. What do I care? They offered to unleash me on your cities, permitted me to gorge my fill on felled stones. The darker the magic, the sweeter the flesh, like spice for your moral delicacies. How could I say no? If my master wants you gone as well, it's nothing to me. Another meal. Well, hot damn. Both Arlo and the Reaper shot their focus up to the top of the apartment building on Arlo's right. This keeps getting better and better. My princess and my Reaper, at long last. What's a girl to do with all this excitement? Relief coursed through her like a flood. Arlo had no idea if Nausicaa actually stood a chance against a Reaper, but she was here, and she didn't have to be able to bear it. All she had to do was teleport them away. Arlo would live to see another day, where she was definitely no longer allowed to leave her mother's apartment ever again because Sallow was going to hear about this. There was no question about it. But the important thing was that she would live. So eager for death. The Reaper sniffed the air, unable to see Nausicaa. It apparently tried to reacquaint itself with the smell of her magic. I know you. What are you? Come down, little bird. Let me taste your fear. Nausicaa laughed, stepping off the ledge of the building. The pavement cracked beneath her feet where she landed. Geez, and they call me dramatic. A curious thing took place as Nausicaa spoke. Darkness spilled from the center of her back between the blades of her shoulders. Yeah, it's a Reaper. It wants to eat her. Reapers eat people. And Fae, apparently. It unspooled in the air like smoke, seemingly endless, growing out behind her. For a moment, Arlo thought this was a cue for their escape. It seemed like the exact same smoke that had teleported them here. She took a step forward, hand outstretched to grab hold of Nausicaa's arm, but there was something different about this substance, giving her pause. The unspooling darkness took on shape. The indistinguishable mass, like a blot of ink spilling from its well, began to sift apart and grow. Flaring out on either side of her, it formed itself like massive, shadowy, rags-like wings. Arlo retracted a step to make room for this spreading darkness. When a loud crack and patter of crumbling brick on the cement drew her attention to the wall, she realized her mistake. These rags of shadows were wings, and they were sprouting bones, the talons tipping their skeletal structure strong enough to pierce through stone. Soon the frame of Nausicaa's wings took up more space than the narrow alley was able to give, and more brick began to crack and crumble to the ground all around them. Arlo could only watch in awe as the darkness itself became something else too. Not quite leather, not quite feather, the membranous black hung in shreds from ebony bone, and fluttered in some non-existent breeze like strips of shredded silk. It smoldered the way fire did when only recently extinguished, heat still pouring in waves from winding veins that glowed like embers. Nausicaa herself seemed larger, unchanged at least from what Arlo could see of her back. But there was a blurriness around her too, like a negative image in a poorly taken photo, a hint of something greater and far more terrible than the hauntingly beautiful blonde looming between the eclipsing height of her wings. Chomp. This glimpse of Nausicaa as she'd once been, her former furious glory, was more than enough for Arlo to know that in this moment, the one she should fear the most was the person standing between her and painful, bone-crunching death. And yet Arlo was the least afraid she'd ever been in her life. Link, why are you doing the commands? In fact, something inside her felt almost enthralled, so profoundly it stole her breath. The Reaper certainly didn't look pleased. Far from it. No, we want people to support the Trevor project. So do exclamation point challenge or exclamation point Trevor. Yeah, maybe Link from GMM will donate. Good job, Link. What was left of its face seemed to crumble, realizations of its own finally clicking into place. Whatever memory it had of Furies and Nausicaa, Arlo was willing to bet none of them were pleasant. Aranis, the Reaper rasped, bending itself into a grotesque parody of a bow. Forgive me, I didn't know that it was you. Don't worry, sometimes I forget I'm me too. Nausicaa took a step forward, the talons of her wings scoring fissures in the walls. The Reaper fell fully prostrate on the ground. Prostrate? There's an R in there. And Arlo marveled at the behavior. I beg you, allow this lovely creature its retreat. Do not condemn me to the pool. I will leave the city. I won't come back. I do not wish to be destroyed. A Reaper, begging for its life. Despite everything, the miserable way it spoke strummed a chord of pity in Arlo's heart. What's the pool? She asked. The Starfire pool. Nausicaa replied in a way that made Arlo regret asking. Her tone was so tight around contempt, it was a wonder Nausicaa could speak at all. The pit where immortals go to be destroyed, for whatever reason, and where those who break the fundamental laws are brought to die. She continued forward until she stood directly in front of the Reaper, arms folded across her chest. Get up. I wouldn't send you there even if it was still my job to do that. You might be a creep, but you haven't done anything to warrant destruction. Eating people isn't dark magic, it's just rude. The Reaper hesitated, as though it could hardly believe its luck. Then it lifted its head. You will let me go? Arlo recovered from her awe at last. Nausicaa, we can't just let it go. It's been killing Ironborn. We need to bring it to the High King. We need to... Yeah, is that why you're all the way out here? Nausicaa turned around, hands falling to her hips. Her face was set with a sternness that took Arlo aback. Were you going to arrest this asshole too and march him back to the palace like you were going to do with me? Listen, I'm all kinds of proud of the bravery it took to do that, but next time do me a favor and let someone know before you take off after murderous plot points. I'm sort of responsible for you right now. Starting a war with the courts might be my retirement plan, but I'd rather not do it over your dead body. I'm sorry. Arlo sighed at the reprimand. It figured that she could be too sheltered and too independent all the same. I tried to get back to you, but I couldn't get through to the right shop, and besides, what if the hunt is on its way? They're bound to notice a Reaper just blew apart a chunk of the Danforth. Nausicaa snorted, something in the statement amusing. I swear to you, I won't return to any city space, said the Reaper, even more distressed after Arlo's mention of the hunt. Let me go. Do not hand me over to the hunt. I have information. I will trade that for my life. Arlo pursed her lips. Shooting a glance at Nausicaa, she crouched her way under the smoking, fluttering barrier of those wings to get a little closer. You said someone sent you here to kill me. Oh, okay, so that stuff with the goblins really was a distraction. Cool. Arlo shot another look at Nausicaa, unsure of what she meant, but decided to save the line of questioning for later. She turned back to the Reaper. You said someone wanted you to clean up after them. Clean up what? The Ironborn your master's been experimenting on? It was vaguely disconcerting to be considered by something with a hollow head and no visible eyes. Arlo didn't think she'd forget the sight anytime soon. I was tasked to hunt down the would-be alchemists whose hearts had failed the stone they carried. I have no idea what their connection was to my master. I never asked. Who is your master, then? Can you at least tell us that? Yeah, the Reaper's got no eyes. If she could just get a name, they wouldn't have to investigate Vahan's questionable facility. Arlo wouldn't have to get any more involved. This could all be over, and she wouldn't have to worry any longer about someone wanting her dead, or why. As much as her great-uncle wished to ignore all of this, he couldn't ignore an actual culprit. The adults would have to do their jobs, and Arlo could go back to whatever remained of the child she wished she was still, who only knew death as a concept and fear as a thing cured by a hug. Hello, Kenyo. How are you? I don't know. And Arlo's hope wilted, much like the expression on her face. You don't know? The Reaper shook its head. I do not. My master and the one he answers to. Neither ever gave me their names, though I've met them both. I know that they're both male, that one is like you, Ironborn. The other I could not scent, could not taste. I only knew that they were there when they spoke. He calls my master his hero. Oh, that's fun. Reading TOS documents? That sounds absolutely horrible and awful. Oh. That makes sense. It still doesn't sound like fun though. Link, pin that. I guess Kenyo could pin it. You're also a mod. Coffers. There you go. Yeah, go check out stream.fun. Stream.fun? I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce things. Thanks, you spelled it the same exact way again. So that doesn't tell me. Like that's how it's spelled in the link. Strum. It's strum.fun. Strum.fin. You keep you keep putting that word. It doesn't tell me how it's pronounced though. Strum.fin. Yeah. I know how it's spelled. I know how to spell it. I just don't know how to say it. No, I don't know where I'm at. Oh, okay. So really, Nasuke interrupted. You don't know anything. That isn't much of a trade. And now I'm kind of pissed, so I'm thinking maybe I'll destroy you after all. No, wait, please. I can tell you where to find them. I can tell you what the scentless one is. I don't know their names, but the one my master serves. I know what he serves. I know his ilk. Please promise me freedom and I'll tell you. The fuck is ilk? You say it like slime without the E. Is that not just slim? Why didn't you say slim? Oh. Okay. I've never heard that word in my life. So it's strim? Strim? Is that what you're saying it's pronounced? Okay. Strim.fun. No, I've never heard ilk before, Link. I've heard the word slim before. Is that what you said? Yeah, slim. Nausicaa walked forward, coming up to Arlo's side. As she moved, her wings retracted. The negative space around her receded. The smoldering shadows were extinguished, and Nausicaa's mask of mortality slipped back into place. She shared a look with Arlo, the lethal lines of her face etched in continued severity, before turning the steel of her gaze back on the Reaper. You'll tell me now or I'll end you right here. The scentless one. He's with the What? Whatever the Reaper had been about to say was cut off by a groan. The ground around them darkened, a plum-black stain pulling outward and eating away at the pavement on which the Reaper knelt. Arlo leapt away, held by Nausicaa's yank to the back of her shirt. Helped by Nausicaa's yank to the back of her shirt. Together they shuffled out of the path of this mysterious, corrosive puddle of what looked to Arlo like the same shadowy substance from which Nausicaa's wings had sprouted. What's happening? Arlo panicked. My old job, said Nausicaa, astonished. But why? Nausicaa's old job? Did she mean were Furies the ones behind whatever was happening right now? Wait, Nausicaa shouted over the Reaper's renewed shrieking. It was being swallowed by the pool, consumed by the very ground beneath it, sinking down into the depths of some place Arlo had a feeling she would never wish to go herself. Wait, what were you going to say? The scentless one. Who is he? Tell me. Does she mean GameStop? I'm not sure what you're referring to when you said that. The Reaper couldn't respond. Its cries grew strangled, that darkness crawling up around its body, wrapping serpent tight, binding the creature to its fate. It sank, and in mere eternal seconds it was going, gone. The old job. Oh, because Nausicaa's old job. No, her old job was a Fury, not GameStop. I don't think she's worked at GameStop. If you say so, Kenyo. I don't believe you, but thank you. The pool withdrew. The darkness reeled itself in and shrank to a drop, which the ground absorbed. Arlo and Nausicaa were left with nothing but a ringing silence. Shit. No, not facts. Arlo's gaze snapped away from the spot where the Reaper had once been and sought out Nausicaa. She wanted to say something, to ask why Nausicaa looked so distressed when it was her the Reaper had named as a target. She wanted to know what would happen to it, where it was going, what all this meant, but instead, when she opened her mouth... No. I refuse. It's not facts. What did I tell you? No. Arlo jerked around. Somehow a girl not much older than her had come between them and the back of the alley. I refuse your refusal of my refuse. Okay, Link? Has she been there all along? Like the Reaper, has she been hidden under unusually strong glamour? Dennis also tells lies. I already knew that, though. Dennis only tells lies. Now I don't know where I was at. Like the Reaper, had she been hidden under unusually strong glamour, biding her time, waiting for just the right moment to reveal herself. She was taller, larger than life, almost, yet human in appearance. The long cascade of her black ink hair, the angular features, the purple dress that clung like paint to her skin, None of it was technically out of the ordinary except for the fact that something about this girl was different. Otherworldly. Her complexion was the gray of bitterly cold water, and nothing about her fit here, like a poorly edited image. The very air around her glistened, distorted as though warped by a thin veneer of ice. I can't comprehend that to keep refusing the refusals. But I still refuse. And her eyes cut just as sharp and steely as Nausicaa's. She knew who this was without needing to be told. Another Fury. Arlo shrank a step back. Nausicaa rounded instantly on this intruder. Not a whole hell of a lot, Meg, hence why I'm still here. Why did you do that? Why did you sentence that Reaper to destruction? So it killed a bunch of people, big flippin' deal. It didn't use magic to do that, so it wasn't an immortal concern. You aren't supposed to touch it. The intruder, Meg, laughed. Her head dipped slightly back. The slender, pale column of her throat bared to Nausicaa. The sound reminded Arlo of an echo trapped in a bottomless pit, and made this Meg more frightening to her than the Reaper had been. She inched a bit closer to Nausicaa. Are you giving me a lecture about rules? How rich? The Fury Meg stepped forward, those gray eyes flashing. I don't have to explain myself, not to you. You whom I specifically ordered to stay out of this. What do you hope to accomplish, I wonder, in ignoring that? In running around after things that no longer concern you? Her gaze shifted to Arlo, looked her up and looked her down. You can't possibly think you could earn your way back. Nausicaa narrowed her eyes. Piss off. I wouldn't come back if you begged me. Who would even? Meg took another step toward them. Beg for someone like you. I'd laugh if the very idea wasn't so pathetically you. Not one to pass on a challenge, at least from what Arlo had so far gathered on her new friend. Nausicaa crowded Meg right back. Oh, you want to talk about things that are pathetic, do you? Whatever it did to piss you off, how long to catch up to one little Reaper? Big bad Megara, so much better than everyone else, when that thing's been here for days. It was never a target until now, Megara replied stiffly. No, is it Megara or is it Megara? Okay, I will hydrate and stretch. Now, where was I? This question. Something about the way she glanced at Arlo made her curious about what that meant. Was it that the Reaper had finally made itself enough of a nuisance to warrant Fury intervention, or that it had gone after something specific today, something the Immortals wouldn't be all that happy about it harming? Before she could ask what that could be, Nausicaa growled out, Why? Don't get me wrong, I don't want back in your stupid little treehouse club. I just want to know what's going on. Tell me something, and maybe I'll leave it alone like you want. Like I want. Meg had surged forward. She seemed to grow larger in her anger. The aura of her magic easy now to detect, the way it flooded the alley, cool and salty, like glacial sea air. You know what I want? It should have been you. It should have been you. You should have been the one to die, not Tisiphone. If the gods let me pick which sister to lose, I would have picked. Arlo moved without thinking. Her nerves were still caught up in shock and adrenaline. Megara's words had been the most ghastly thing she'd ever heard anyone say to someone else. Someone who, by the sound of things, was supposed to be family. And this was even in comparison to the one time High Prince Cerulean had pulled her aside one memorable palace visit to tell her she'd ruined her mother's life by being born. Yo, what the fuck? Yeah, these people saying some mean shit. Nausicaa stood there as though stricken. There were the things that made Arlo stride right up to Megara and slap her in the face. Edda! Hello, Edda. Yeah, that's the content warning. This book is very content-filled. Yeah, hello, Edda. Nausicaa stood there as though stricken. There were the things that made Arlo stride right up to Megara and slap her in the face. Only once the deed was done and Megara's face had snapped to the side did Arlo realize she had in fact done it. Oh, she just went up and slapped her. But she wasn't sorry. She was deeply afraid she'd just survived a Reaper to be gutted by a Fury, judging by the look of pure astonishment on the face that now turned back to her. But she wasn't sorry. Apologize, she ordered. That was an awful thing to say to your own sister. You can't mean that. Tell her you're sorry. Nausicaa stared. Megara did too. Arlo held her ground, slightly wishing it would open up and swallow her the way it had done for the Reaper, but even more slightly worried it would do exactly that. But for all Megara bristled and drew herself imposingly, impossibly taller, she said nothing. She did nothing. Nothing but turn and sweep out an arm, and leathery, glossy black wings burst from her back. They wrapped her up quick as it took Arlo to blink, and she was gone. The painful, indefinable emotion that Arlo occasionally saw in Nausicaa's gaze was bright and just as nameless as ever when she looked up at her, and then, like every other time Arlo caught it, quickly shuddered away. You just slapped a Fury in the face. Yeah. Arlo released a shaky breath, looking down at her palm. It stung. She slapped a Fury in the face, and hard. Come on, Nausicaa added gently as she threaded her arm through Arlo's. That's enough excitement for one day. I think let's go find our straggling summer fae and get you back for that curfew of yours. You know, she just slapped a fucking Fury in the face. Ow. That was the end of chapter 23. And that's gonna be it for today. Oh, everybody is offline now. No, Pyro's never online. What are you talking about, Link? Pyro's not live. Pyro's never live. we just gonna go back to Pyro's. I hear messages. I can't see them because I'm still getting things pulled up. What? I missed so many messages. What happened? Friend of mine, Cassadot, is on. Pyro being live is a government conspiracy. True Link. She's doing a subathon. I can't raid Chica Shimane. That's me. I can't raid myself. I do, Etta. Do you have a recommendation? Kenyo recommended somebody. but do you also have one? Maybe we'll do a poll. No, Chica Shimane is not best streamer. Oh my god, Nat, go away. Oh, now I can't... Well, when you do a poll, you can't see chat anymore. Well, that's fun. What? Who did that? I was in the middle of making a poll. Link, did you do that? Chica is not an option. I cannot raid myself. Thank you, Link. I did not know you were doing it, though. I was sitting here doing it. That made it so much easier, though. Alright, are we actually gonna get an answer from this poll, though? Or is it just gonna be tied? Well, Link, you're gonna be the tiebreaker if you're the one who hasn't voted yet. That's not an option. Ignore that option. And all the pressure is on the you, Link. I'm gonna close your eyes and click. You pressed Nikki. Nikki? Nikkei. Yo, look at Link being a good mod. Let me actually copy that this time. I did. I just copied it. I literally just did. There's a gnat right on my camera. Oh. I guess I should make a not sub raid message. I should probably do that. Okay, we're raiding now. Bye.